Hi everyone, thank you for joining the First Nations Navigation of Bias in the Queer Space. First of all, I'd like to acknowledge and pay respects to the land on which I'm coming from, the land of the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation here in Sydney, Australia. I'd like to extend that acknowledgement to all other First Nations people on the call this afternoon. Thank you for all giving your time. My name is Weston. I am a very proud Yorta man. I grew up most of all my life home at my community at Danger on the banks of the Murray River in New South Wales. I'm currently the Region 20 representative to InterPride. I'm also on the membership. I'm also a committee member of the World Pride Committee, the Human Rights and Diversity Committee, and a member of the Global Advisory Council and a member of the board. So today is about the navigation of bias within our queer space. So I'd like to the panelists will be here today to tell their stories and their journeys as First Nations peoples in this space. Our webinar is going to be a bit different. We're going to hand it over to Damien McDonald, who's going to be moderating and asking the question to the panelists. So no further ado, I hand it over to Damien McDonald. Thank you, brother.
Hi, everybody. My name's Daniel McDonald, and I'm from Sydney, Gadigal man. I'm very proud. I'm a gay man. I'm deaf. I'm here and I'm representing my Aboriginal art and also disability. I'd like to thank everybody for inviting me to be here and be the moderator for this. So now I'd ask Ricki, can you introduce yourself, please?
Thank you for that, Daniel, and thank you everyone who's listening to this, whether you're live streaming from Facebook or whether you're listening to the radio. Very privileged to be here. As my name is Ricki Spencer, my pronouns are they, them and her. I'm a proud Indigenous woman from the stolen generation. I was adopted and only found out of my Indigenous heritage later in my life, in my mid-40s. I'm also a teacher. I have been a social worker for over 25 years. I'm now a research student exploring transgender spaces within high school settings. I also sit on a number of panel committees, spaces, and my desire is to create a space where First Nations queer people will feel inclusive. Thank you. And now it's over to, I'll hand it over to Daniel to introduce the next panelist.
Thank you, Ricki. Okay, I'd like to introduce to you Keenan Smith. Go ahead, Keenan.
Hello, everyone. I'd just like to acknowledge the country that I'm zooming in from today, from that being the country of the Kaurna people here in Adelaide. Also acknowledge and pay respect to their elders, past, present and emerging. My name is Keenan. I am a Gugutha Wirrungwa and Mining person from the far west coast of South Australia. I use they, them pronouns, identify as non-binary. I grew up in country South Australia, so in the towns of Port Lincoln and Tadjoona. So very coastal, beachy person. In the background, this is the Great Australia Bight, which is part of Wirrungwa Mining country. It pretty much covers most of the far western area of South Australia. Yeah, so I live now in Adelaide, moved over to go to university where I'm finishing off an environmental sciences degree. Also, I was the 2021 South Australian LGBTQI+ person of the year. And I'm also the chairperson for the Wirrungwa Aboriginal Corporation, which looks after the Southern Wirrungwa Native Title claims. Yeah, so I come from a, I guess, diverse background of disciplines. Always pushing for opportunities for mob. I also work as a mentor and a tutor for Aboriginal high school students at one of the boarding schools here. I don't know, yeah. I guess I'll hand it back to Daniel and hear from me a bit more later. Thank you.
Wow, that's amazing, Keenan. That's such an interesting, on your land. And it looks beautiful in the background there. Oh my gosh, it's gorgeous. Thank you, Keenan. Next we have is Kaylene. I'd like to introduce you all to Kaylene.
Thank you, Daniel. Wallawani, my name is Kaylene McLeod. I'm a Wadi Wadi Monero woman from the South Coast, traditional owner from the Wreck Bay Aboriginal community. My pronouns are she, her. I'm currently calling you, everybody here from beautiful Ngunnawal, Ngambri country here in Canberra, where I live and work. I'm employed as an Indigenous liaison officer within one of the Commonwealth agencies down here in Canberra. I also sit on the Yes Fest board, which is a pride board for the Canberra region. So my kind of work that I like to participate in is inclusiveness and diversity for different people in different backgrounds, particularly with a strong emphasis on Indigenous spaces for our people. Yeah, I'm a very active person in the community. My wife and I also run a charity that specifically targets support for Indigenous people basically around Canberra and the surrounding areas. So thank you so much. It's an honour to be here, and I'll pass it back over to you. Thank you, Daniel.
Wow, Kaylene, that's wonderful, a wonderful story. It's nice to hear what you're involved in. That's great. Yeah, it's very empowering. Thank you. Thanks for your story. Next, I'd like to introduce you to Damien. Damien, Ralph.
My name's Damien Ralph. I'm an Aboriginal man, a gay man. I live on the Kaurna country as well, here in South Australia or Adelaide, but I am from Victoria originally. My grandfather is from a tribe called Gunai Kurnai, which is a part of the 90-mile beach of Victoria, where all the fresh water meets with the ocean or the salt water. My grandmother is from Watchabollock country, which is very different. That is very much a more central Wimmera district, where there's one freshwater river running through the main of it, and that's kind of dry dirt other than that, where I grew up in a little tin shack with no electricity for a while, but it was some of the best times. I was a dancer and a performing artist and still am, but primarily for 10 years as a professional, and I did some stilt walking through America, Canada, China, Japan, and other countries of the world. But now I work in a very different field. So I work in prevention of child protection and child removal, and building capacity of parenting skills amongst parents who need a little bit more help in the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander community. I also sit on the committee for Artistic Advisory Committee here for the Feast Festival, which is the Adelaide Queer LGBTIQ Arts and Community Cultural Festival, as well as a few other things. But yeah, it's an honour to be invited and to share the space with my fellow brothers and sisters here. Thank you, Daniel.
Wow, lots of skills going on there, Damien. That's amazing, brother. That's awesome to hear that. That's great. So now I'd like to introduce you to Mel Dagger, who is my interpreter, and she voices for me. So this is Mel. Hi, I'm Melinda. I'm an Auslan interpreter down here in Australia, and I'm from Jervis Bay down the South Coast. Thank you. Thank you, Mel. No. So hopefully it's interesting for all of you to watch today on this Zoom webinar worldwide. And we have some questions for the panel, and I'll begin to ask them now. So each question, you've got 2 minutes to answer them. If you choose to answer the question, that's fine. It's your opinion if you want to express it. If you don't want to answer, that's okay. But if you want to elaborate, that's okay too. Yeah, let's start. Okay, so Ricki, we'll start with you. That's okay. We'll ask you the first question. Can you recount a time when you personally felt your voice was not heard and you were overlooked for a governance role within the queer community?
Thank you for that question, Daniel. A quite important question to begin with. I must also say I'm on Wurundjeri land. I'm based out in Victoria. And for me, there's been a number of organisations within recent years that I've applied. And as I'm finding my journey amongst my heritage and my birth mum and father, I have been struck by the number of organisations which do judge me on terms of whether they feel I'm an appropriate component to be within their organisation. As a transgender person who is pale-skinned, I am constantly being asked to, well, where are you from? Where is your mob? And I'm always having to prove myself. I've been overlooked for governance boards within Victoria, especially for the Pride and Transgender Victoria. And it does disappoint me that there is very few First Nations representations on many of our spaces. So for me, it's not just about myself being overlooked, but also in general, First Nations having a voice to be in those positions. Thank you.
Wow, that's really interesting. That's yeah, it has a huge impact. That's amazing. Yeah, what you're involved in and what you've been through. Thank you for sharing. Thanks, Ricki. Now we'd like to move on to the second question, Ricki. Don't want to give you a difficult one. Do you feel that was equitable opportunities for First Nations queer representations within queer-led spaces? And can you elaborate from your own intersectionality?
That's a great question. Thank you for that, Daniel. I guess I should say that being someone who's now 53, who has a number of invisible and lived disabilities, where my health is greatly impacted by my mobility and by my gender affirmation, I have been excluded as a teacher working in any Victorian schools since I came out as transgender. And although I've applied for over 50 positions and I'm qualified to teach in both primary and secondary school spaces, I've been sort of advised that because I am seen as a risk within the school, that they can't guarantee the safety of myself or for the students and their parents, which has sort of made that space more likely that how can we ever change that spacing to allow more and more people who are transgender and First Nations to be in leadership roles within the school. There are other spaces too that that I feel that we don't get as much of a space to say our opinions, especially in political spaces in Australia, where we're not supported in taking on leadership roles. And we're always having to question as to why we are where we are. And for someone like myself, who is from the stolen generation, I did not have a choice to be removed from my parents. And because I am, my skin isn't as dark, I'm always having to ask in all spaces, well, are you really who you say you are? So I'm always having what I'd call a fractured identity, that I'm always having to almost have to wear a label on myself as to represent who I am. So for me, I don't feel there are enough opportunities for our community. We are always having to fight for any space or hearing about any opportunities through third-hand voices. And a lot of the times, many of us don't have the supports put into place to help us lead and be in positions where we can direct resources to make sure all our queer Black mob are supported, especially brother boys and sister girls living with disabilities. Thank you.
Again, wow. Okay, that's very powerful. It's interesting that the opportunities that you've missed out on, and unfortunately, yeah. And thank you for your answers. That's really made me think about things. So I'll move on to the third question because it probably is linked to the second. And do you consider the Australian peak bodies who advocate for queer rights provide the same amount, if representations, for our First Nations communities?
Another really good question. It's really difficult to answer that because coming from a lived experience and everything that we see perpetuated in the media, whether it be print or digital, does seem to always be focused on white privileged spaces and binary spaces and, dare I say, youth spaces. So when you are older, when you are trans or gender diverse, whether you are living with a disability, all these impact on your voice in terms of, are you being heard? Are you being represented? And most importantly, do you have a space to make a change in the community? Many of us are still waiting to have an opportunity to make some effective change, but we always still are waiting to get someone to give us permission or to let us onto that glass ceiling, what I call the rainbow ceiling, which is still in Australia very much threaded amongst white privileged, cisgendered, gay, lesbian and gay men. And until we can kind of lift that space and have more diverse brother boys, sister girls, and even, dare I say, leading campaigns, whether it be at Mardi Gras as a prominent people, and older trans, masculine and trans feminine people, maybe with disabilities, till we move away from that projected cisgendered privileging ways of seeing, then I don't feel that we have really moved on. And I still feel that there is still only tokenism when it comes to supporting us in our journeys through that space. So I would have to say to that question, no, we do not get enough representation. And my evidence would be to anybody listening, just Google the boards all around Australia and see how many people do identify as First Nations Australia within this country. How many of those in queer spaces are they brother boys or sister girls? And I would even say even fewer. And even out of that, how many have a lived disability or invisible disability are there? And again, I'd say even fewer. So until that is addressed, ableism is rife within this space and queer space, unfortunately.
Thank you, Ricki. I really agree with you. We need to be more, there must be more people queer and diverse on the boards around Australia. It's in lead. It's, for the First Nations people and the community, there's not enough of it and there needs to be more. So that's a really good answer, something to think about. Just quickly, the fourth question, what experiences have you had from within our own First Nations queer community that have made you feel excluded?
And I've mentioned on this briefly in the beginning, and it's been where I've had to quite a few times people would ask me, well, where mob are you from? And why don't you know? And then it's again, I have to explain that I was born in the late 60s. And in those days, as people would know, religious privilege was very much the space where things could be changed and documentation can be forged. And for many of us, we didn't have a choice, as I mentioned, about being removed from our parents. We are the product of perhaps love that may have taken place, and of a time and space when Indigenous people were highly surveilled and scrutinised. And if you were, for whatever reason, deemed as unfit or the time of the policies, you were removed. We didn't have a choice. And as a result, now I pay the consequences, because even within my space, I am either seen not black enough or not slim enough or too old, disabled, and it makes me sad, because all I desperately want is to connect. All I desperately want is to be with my mob too, and feel a part of the community that I feel I've missed out for over 45 years. So for me, it's a sadness in my heart, still looking for my birth mother and father, and still having a branch there for other people to accept me within my beautiful Black queer community.
Wow. Very heartening there. Thank you for your story. And you've shown us that, yeah, I mean, we're all family. We are all family. So one more question, Ricki. What would you like to envision for our queer First Nation community within the next 5 years? Going forward, what do we want?
Well, the thing I have to say is the clear word, visibility and representation in all spaces. We have the right to be seen and heard. We come in all shapes and sizes. We come in all shades of Black. We have a beautiful culture that's been here for thousands of years. And yes, queerness has been around since the beginning of time. And it's so important that we acknowledge that we have been here and that we are represented. And I dare I say that we are allowed to be in positions and embraced to be in leaderships and governance roles. And I truly hope that within 5 years, within this space, that we will see more people be on peak body CEOs, that we have brother boys, sister girls being in leadership roles and seen as great role models, not just for our Black community, but also for all queer communities, and that they feel embraced with our journey and our leadership, because queerness crosses cultures, but it's only the social structures and power that stops people from getting access to resources and services. And this is something we must change. We must break down that privileging of queer spaces and really do allow for us to have our voice, because we do have a lot to offer, and we have a lot to offer in governance spaces. Thank you.
That's amazing. Gosh, what you're dreaming about for the next 5 years and what your goals are, that's amazing. Yeah, and I believe that it's achievable. I think that it can be done. So now I'd like to say thank you for all those questions and answering all those questions. And now I would like to ask the same questions to our other panelists and see what your answers are. So go ahead. I'd like to ask Keenan.
Hey, can you hear me?
Recount a time?
Oh, sorry.
Yep. Can you recount a time when you personally felt that your voice was not heard or you were overlooked for a governance role within the queer community?
Yeah, so I got involved in student politics when I started at university. If I could give a word of advice to anyone going to university, don't get involved in student politics. But yeah, it was more along the lines of, also when I first came to Adelaide, you come here, you leave your community where you're kind of misunderstood because you're queer, also you're non-binary or of a different gender outside the binary, and you expect when you come to these larger spaces in the cities that you would feel welcomed. It's about a community of inclusion, and then you slowly realize that racism also exists in the LGBTQI plus community. So when I came to Adelaide, I thought everything was going to be kumbaya, you know, we're going to be all deadly and stuff. But then you slowly realize, or quickly often, that that's not the case, and that your insights as a First Nations person, and because you're looking at things not just from one lens, but from multiple lenses of disadvantage, and that's often overlooked or not even considered or ignored. And that often the queer community likes to blur the lines between, well, from my experience, gender, race, and sexuality. It's often they equate being queer to being First Nations or Black. And it's like, well, no, why are you blurring those lines? You don't have the same experience as I do. Imagine being a person of color or First Nations and being queer or non-binary or trans, you know, like, yeah. So often in regards to governance roles, I don't think there's that understanding of why do we need our voices heard on these in these positions. I think it's often a role where they're wanting it there purely out of tokenism or because they're seeing that other organizations are doing that. But I don't think there's a genuine understanding of, well, why do we need First Nations voices here?
Again, very important First Nations. And I guess, yeah, important for the future and yeah, the political area of it. It's very interesting to hear that, Keenan. Second question, do you personally feel there are equitable opportunities for First Nations queer representations within queer-led spaces? And can you elaborate from your own intersectionality?
Yeah, so like I was saying with the previous question about organisations that have roles dedicated to First Nations representation, or when you have organisations that don't have that, so you campaign or you petition to have that space in those areas. Often, like when they apply for funding from these funding bodies, like in my experience, they kind of just want the quick answer there and then. And then there's an assumption that as First Nations people, we're all the same. And we have, you know, like we do have shared experiences and we have obviously, I guess, perspectives that we both share, but also our communities aren't the same, our experiences are different. So often when I go into these representative roles or roles that organizations have asked me to join, I start off with that by saying, look, I can't speak for the whole of South Australia, but I can speak from a shared experience. But also I'm not here to give you some kind of band-aid solution answer, you know, like, and it's often what plays out in the mainstream as well, like when it comes to looking for solutions to Indigenous problems. They want some kind of quick fix answer, and it's like, well, we're also dealing with centuries of disadvantagement, trauma and stuff like that. And we're not going to get to an answer by ticking a box or by some little, I don't know, tokenistic position that you're going to give me that's often not paid or underpaid. So I think these organizations that are wanting to represent us, have our inclusions, also need to start from looking at the culture within these organizations, looking at, well, what do we do that can come across as toxic or racist, you know? And start from there as well, because if they want us in these places, well, these places also have to be culturally safe for us and come from a position where they're actually there to help uplift us, not just have us there because they're going to tick a box, because I won't be a part of that. I'm not ticking a box for no one. You know, I don't have to make you feel comfortable. It's been 230 bloody years of this shit. I don't need that. Anyways, sorry.
Sorry, we have to move to the next question. Thank you so much for that answer, Ken. That's wonderful. Thank you. So, third question, moving on. Do you consider the Australian peak bodies who advocate for queer rights provide the same amount of representations for our First Nations communities?
No, well, not in my experience. Also, I guess I live in a regional city like Adelaide, so often when it comes to the queer space and what's going on nationally, Adelaide's kind of a bit behind or a bit excluded. I'll start with that. But also, I'll go into when I won the LGBTQI plus Person of the Year at the South Australian NAIDOC Awards. That kind of got me thinking, like, what is being done in this space in other states and territories? Do they have that, like, that award or that recognition at NAIDOC as well? And there's not even on a national level. So I guess we're seeing from different states and territories that us as First Nations, LGBTQI plus community, we often aren't recognised, or our achievements aren't recognised, or our achievements and stuff like that, which is very important. And so we're being excluded, I guess, on that front from our First Nations communities. But then also, when I won that award, I was thinking, so what other queer organizations here in Adelaide, like what are they doing? And are they going to approach me, I guess? Because I shouldn't have to approach them, as like speaking about, I guess, feasts where they have, it's obviously like Adelaide's queer festival or what, I don't know, celebration. Like, I think going on in the future that someone that wins my award this year and going forward should have some kind of ex officio position in that, so that it's honouring or acknowledging our achievements in that, because my award is elected by the Aboriginal community, so it's a community representative role as well. And I've had the honour of sharing this award with two of my other sister girls, Charlotte, and my sister girl, brother boy, Zachariah, you know, so very prominent people in the queer community in South Australia. So I'd like to see that as well. I don't know, it's hard because you're still having to educate these queer spaces around racism, also racism of First Nations people, because it started since day one when the Union Jack was planted here. So I don't know, I don't want to be negative and stuff like that, but also we have to acknowledge what's going on and we have to talk about that, you know, so we can actually get somewhere, not me having the same conversations every year, you know. It's tiring. No wonder why I smoke. Anyways.
All right, thank you, Keenan. That's lovely. Amazing, you won that award. That's amazing. I didn't know that. That's amazing, well done. Gosh, I wonder how many other people have not said anything. Yeah, that's I'm really pleased to hear that. That's deadly, brother. Wow, fantastic. Gives me goosebumps, actually. That's fantastic. So just quickly for the fourth question, what experiences have you had from within our own First Nations queer community that have made you feel excluded?
Yeah, I guess not necessarily within the First Nations queer community, but I guess the wider First Nations community. I guess growing up, I'm later in my 20s, so this is before RuPaul's Drag Race, a bit more mainstream. and that, I don't want to talk about that show a lot, but I feel like that's kind of brought a broader understanding to some of these white followers as well about LGBTQI stuff. But anyways, I was lucky that when I came to Adelaide, I kind of met other queer First Nations mob and we kind of formed a little collective, and that was kind of our safe space, and we navigated through, I guess, white queer spaces. But growing up in the country, I guess because I was different from the other boys, I wasn't a boy, you know, like I wasn't going on dates and shit like that with girls, or, you know, I wasn't very masked, even though I'm 6'4", you know, so people expected me to be the boy, you know, like, g'day mate, not my vibe. So I had that growing up, but as I've gotten older, I guess perceptions have changed and stuff like that. Like, I was very surprised that when I went to like our natal title meetings and I got on the board of directors, that a lot of my elders and my aunties and uncles on that voted me as the chairperson to run a natal title, you know, like I was like, oh, okay. So that was kind of the first time where I experienced that, like, my gender identity and my sexuality weren't a barrier. And I guess not everyone has that experience either, you know, so I don't want to say that for everyone, but for me, I was like, okay, so like our mob's perception is changing. Like, I guess we have that history of being indoctrinated through Christianity. So when it comes to having conversation with my mob and they tell me that my gender or my sexuality goes against Christianity, I tell them to get fucked, because Christianity was forced on our people and we come from something much older. But I support them in their choices, you know, but I guess, yeah, I don't know. Like, I've had pretty good experiences so far. Obviously, I said early part, growing up, there was a bit of, you know, I don't know, like a bit of negativity and stuff like that from a lot of them, especially the males. And I want to give praise to First Nations women in our community, because often when it comes to queer mob and LGBTQI mob, they often are the ones there for us and uplifting us and pushing us through. And yeah, so that's my experience anyways.
Fantastic. Thank you, Keenan. Keenan, what a lovely story. It's a very positive story for those people who's in those communities, and yep, where you're moving from and to. So last question for you, Keenan. And what would you like to envision for our queer First Nation community within the next 5 years?
Yeah, so I definitely want to see other states and territories and even the National NAIDOC Award have a category for LGBTQI plus Person of the Year. I think it's very important to have that recognition and our achievements honoured, or not honoured, or acknowledged at least, you know. I guess 'cause at the moment it's only South Australia and Victoria that I know of that are doing those awards. Also, I want to see more opportunities for mob that don't live in the metro areas, you know, because I often think about the mob left back home or in those country regional areas, and every Aboriginal community, Torres Strait Islander community you're going to go to, that's more than likely always going to be someone like myself or the other panel members here today, you know, there's always going to be someone like us. And I'd love to see more inclusion of them mob going forward in the future, you know, because often we've forgotten about out in the community, you know. No one, you know, unless we come to Adelaide, and often a lot of us choose to come, not to Adelaide, but choose to come to metro areas for opportunities, for support and for finding our community. But then we realize there's racism over here. So we build our own little communities, you know. I guess because I come from that background also, you know. But also, I just like to see more inclusion also from our own First Nations communities for LGBTQI plus mob. Like I was involved with our Aboriginal peak body here in South Australia through getting getting Rainbow Tick accredited. And from my knowledge, we're the only health peak body for state and territories in Australia that have gone and done that. When I looked at other peak Aboriginal health bodies, there was no one, there was nothing about LGBTQI mob on their websites, or even including us within their websites or practices, or promoting this to their allied health services, you know. I think that's also a very important thing as well. The more and more that we start normalizing this and talking about this in our communities as well, will make it a lot more safer and better for us mob, especially for our mental health and cultural inclusion, you know. It's not just about young ones too, like Ricki was saying, what about the older mob, you know?
Thank you, Keenan. Wow, that's really interesting. And I agree with you, brother. I absolutely agree with you with your points. We need to set up these areas and talk more about it and promote it. So over the next 5 years, that's what we're going to do. Thank you, Keenan. It's amazing what you said. So now I'd like to introduce our next panelist, Kaylene. Are you ready, Kaylene?
Thank you, Damien.
You look a bit nervous.
Yes, thank you. Bit nervous.
You look ready. Okay, go ahead, Kaylene. So first question again. Can you recount a time when you personally felt that your voice was not heard, or you were overlooked for a governance role within the queer community?
So for me, you know, I've been had the opportunity to sit on a number of boards and participate in community groups and a lot of the work that I do in the public service. And it just still baffles me today that we're still dealing with discrimination and stereotypes and homophobia. So, you know, there was instances where, you know, I've had to sit and endure people giving their personal opinions about Aboriginal people and our cultures and our processes and protocols. And it was just, yeah, absolutely baffling to me. And me being me was not one of those people to sit back and let that slide. So, you know, I had to voice my opinion and talk about that kind of mindset and how our people are still having to deal with these kind of attitudes, even now in 2022. It's just unbelievable. In terms of governance roles within the queer community, I've been lucky in those spaces that the people that I have been engaging with have been very respectful and understanding about my views and my life experiences, and I'm always happy to share those with people. But I will, as a strong Aboriginal person, will not stand for that kind of behaviour.
Okay, wow. Okay, I agree with you, Kaylene. It's so true. We need to be more, bring more awareness in communities around the place, so people do it, you know, respect us, and you know, teach them that's it's equality. So we'll move on to the second question. I feel, do you personally feel that there are equitable opportunities for First Nations queer representations within the queer-led spaces? And can you elaborate from your own sectionality? Thank you.
Yes, so just following on from what Ricki and Keenan flagged a little earlier, I would love to see a lot more diversity and inclusion, especially across the rainbow space. You know, we want to make sure that everybody's represented, so everybody gets an opportunity to have a seat at the table and contribute and put forward their ideals and their life experience. I would also like to see more equity around regional and rural reps, giving them the opportunity to have a say, because, you know, I feel that it's really top heavy when it comes to kind of representation from metro areas. Me coming from a small Aboriginal community myself, I would like to see, you know, myself reflected from people in the regions and in the rural areas. I also think that, you know, having that diversity and inclusion also encourages a lot more our people, and especially the queer community, to want to engage. So I think that if there was more focus on those areas in the queer-led space, it would be much easier for people to want to put their hand up and be engaged.
Interesting. That's so true, Kaylene. It's so true. We need to make more connections, bring people together. That's very important. I agree totally. Okay, third question. Do you consider the Australian peak bodies who advocate for queer rights provide the same amount of representations for our First Nations communities?
Personally, I don't feel that there is enough representation. I think there needs to be more emphasis put on making sure that our Indigenous First Nations queer people have a seat at the table. Unfortunately, I've seen in my experience a lot of peak bodies and organisations doing ticking box exercises, you know, where they'll either reach out to either specific individuals or not really go out to the community to consult and have meaningful consultation with communities, so they have that on the ground kind of representation. Also like to see that, you know, there's more options for, like I mentioned before, our rural and remote and regional people being given the opportunity to participate.
Okay, moving on to the fourth question. What experiences have you had from within our own First Nations queer community that have made you feel excluded?
You know, I've had a couple of incidences. The main thing that I feel that is really kind of hard to deal with is that there's a lot of lateral violence within our community. You know, it's hard for us as individuals being Indigenous and queer and trying to either pave our own way or make space for our other mob to be able to feel safe and feel like they're validated and they're equal. So it's hard when we're in amongst our own people that we're dealing with this kind of shredding of each other, and it really breaks my heart. I'd like to see more effort made into like us being able to share experiences, share knowledge, share the space, especially the space, because there's an opportunity for everyone to be able to contribute, and it's not really owned by a central kind of space or central group of people. It's something that needs to be addressed for all of us.
Fifth question, Kaylene, lovely. So what would you like to envision for our queer First Nation community for the next 5 years moving forward?
I would like to see like a lot of community organisations or Indigenous organisations being able to work together. There's so many different areas that we need to address. So if we could work out across the space, you know, how we can make that happen. I'd like to see like more culturally safe spaces created, culturally safe processes in the way that we engage with each other. But I'd like to also have an opportunity for representatives from all over Australia. So that's my vision. I'd like to see that happen. And also that as Indigenous people and First Nations people, that we address, you know, specific things that happen around policies and areas that affect us. Like, you know, we're currently dealing with areas like the religious discrimination bill, which, you know, when you think about it, actually affects all of us outside, not just the religious space. You know, areas around issues we're dealing with, racial profiling and discrimination and homophobia. So I'd like to see us as a people try and work together and try and figure out how we're going to address these things.
That's deadly, Kaylene. Thank you so much. That's really, yeah, it's amazing. And you're fantastic. And your words today have been amazing. So thank you so much. I'd now like to move on to the next person we have on the panel. It's Damien Ralph. Hi, Damien. So I've got some questions for you. Would you like to, and can you recount a time when you personally felt that your voice was not heard or you were overlooked for a governance role within the queer community?
Yeah, I think this has happened a lot. I mean, I've been fortunate to, you know, be able to given a lot of opportunities to participate, but often it's like kind of like Keenan said, or Ricki said, there's that ceiling point where you get to, and it's like you're good enough to be on a committee or a working party or an advisory perspective, but when it comes to the board members or the chairperson, dare we say, or the, you know, the top tiers, then, or the CEO positions, then there's kind of a stopping point where all of a sudden it becomes, this is not an Aboriginal identified position. So why would we want someone who presents from that perspective? And I've been fortunate in the past to go into roles that were non-Aboriginal specific, and through those roles, I've been able to incorporate a lot more, having come from that different perspective, to go, hang on, what about this mob? And what about these people? And what about, you know, people with a disability, and increase, what about the elderly? What about the young people, you know, and bring that perspective, because I'm not just coming in trying to think of, oh, I'm just trying to make sure black fellas are included. I'm like, well, black fellas aren't included, so who else isn't included here? And one of the things that annoyed me the most was things like when you're told you're not grassroots enough, you don't live on your country, so why would we give you a role outside of your country, but also on your country? So you're kind of caught in this middle space where you can't get a job home, but you can't get a job anywhere else because you're in that in-between space. So you kind of just keep climbing the ladder, hoping that, you know, you can help where you can help. But sometimes it feels like, yeah, they are definitely overlooked and not heard. And the other flip side of this is when you are heard, or when you are given these roles, you're probably one of the only people, or and then you become quickly burnt out, because all of a sudden everyone wants to know the answer from you, and everyone wants to know like Keenan said, the quick fix or the band-aid solution, or the quick, they need an answer now. And all of a sudden you're being pulled apart, and you can't be supported to maintain that. So I think there's a flip side to some of it. Like, we need to be able to not only not be overlooked, but be supported when we are given those opportunities, to not burn out.
I agree with you. We need to do more integration, more networking together. And I think it's true in Australia, all over. We need to look at that more clearly. So second question, do you personally feel that there are equitable opportunities for First Nations queer representations within queer-led spaces? And can you elaborate from your own intersectionality?
Yeah, I think no. I mean, being privileged enough to just be a cisgender gay man, as weird as that sounds, having a privilege, but you know, I get some of these things, but as I said before, it's always like, but what about the trans mob, or what about other mobs? So, you know, I kind of get a little bit into that between space where it's like, yes, I get the opportunity or I get to speak, but then it's always like you're trying to make sure that because you're a representative of a whole diverse community, and we take that seriously as a community, then we kind of get spread thin, and we're trying to fix a system or a workplace or an organization that is fractured and broken, and then it's not equitable. It's kind of dividing it even more and more and more until you feel like you're a minority within a minority. So I feel like, especially like Keenan said, coming from a smaller state, it tends to a lot be based on population, or how many, particularly from festivals and stuff, how much profit or how many people will buy tickets from that community. So it's not viewed as, even though it's a community festival or a community event or a community organization, it doesn't seem to come from that perspective. We start to come from this, how do we sustain, rather than this is not what we're about from the first place.
Good point of view. Yeah, good from your perspective. That's interesting. Interesting to hear, Damien. Thank you. And I agree, brother. Moving on, I have another question for you. Question 3. Do you consider the Australian peak bodies who advocate for queer rights provide the same amount of representations for our First Nations communities?
No, I think, like we've touched on before, rural and remote are particularly outlooked at or not looked at and brought to the table as much. I was very surprised when I went home to my community that I'm often dealing with issues in community that I feel like I'm going back in time. I'm like, when I worked in sexual health, it was like we were dealing with certain things in the city that were way beyond the basics of what's going on in the country, you know, basic health promotion, basic information and literacy and education skills around all of those things. And the same thing with a lot of other aspects. You know, drug and alcohol, I did some drug and alcohol work. And when I went back to community, I'm dealing with things that in the city we'd kind of been working on for 10, 15, 20 years. And it's like, how are we leaving parts of our community behind? We should all be moving together in one direction at the same time. And a big part of that is the proportional funding. I don't think that we allocate enough funding. You know, we say we want a welcome to country, and then you look at the budget and the welcome to country is like $250 or $500 or $1,000. It's not, it's seen as to be important, but financially the amount dedicated to that is not equitable or not seen as important. And then we go and hire, you know, or get people that are not even queer or not even thing, but seen as a pop icon or things like that. And it's we spend tens of thousands of dollars in funding that, but we're not funding things that are important to our particular community. So I definitely think no, that, and especially like Keenan said and others have said, if you come from a smaller community, there's no funding there. You're not sort of, and then you don't get a seat at the table. So it needs to be done equitably so that it's not just a city thing, that it's seen as everywhere is happening. And I guess we do that in a number of ways. Not just hosting events in the city would be a good start, is to start, you know, going out into the country and bringing city people to country rather than, you know, disadvantaging country people who are already got less opportunity. But taking the events and the things to them would be, you know, a good start.
Great. Totally agree. Totally agree with you. And it's all part of the funding. Definitely. Definitely. So just moving on, 4th question. What experiences have you had from within our First Nations queer community that have made you feel excluded?
I guess when you start to climb that ladder, or you start to become in those positions where you are a representative of all of your mob, it's kind of then you're expected to do all these things. And when you get burnt out and you forget about people, or you try, you know, you can't do everything for everyone, then you kind of get you are the one then who has to hear from your own community. And I've had to hear from my community at various points, you know, that, you know, there wasn't any funding available, or there was it was marketed to a niche market, or it was just for middle-aged gay men, or you know, cisgender lesbians. So all the time we represent an entire community when we come to the table, and our community holds us accountable. So sometimes that can be really hard to do. But I guess also trying to make sure that when you are doing that, I often step aside sometimes. I'll go, no, how about you get this person to give it a go? Or are you contacting this person? And then it's almost like your mind for your contacts and your resources. It's like, well, we don't know that person and we don't know those people. And do you have a contact number for them? Or do you have an email? And it's like, how about you go out there and actually engage with them and get them involved, so that, you know, we're not, as a community, as Aboriginal community and Torres Strait Islander within the First Nation queer space, then having to be at each other, we're going, actually, you know, having to defend ourselves. And I think here in Adelaide, we're also quite conservative. So we try not, to the best of our ability, to step on each other's toes. We are a small community. We're like, you know, we don't want to do something without consulting people who have already done it before us, and make sure that our thing is not impeding on their thing.
Thank you, brother. Very interesting. Just lastly, we'll finish up with the last question here. What do you, Damien, what do you envisage for our queer First Nation community within the next 5 years?
I think safe space. We say safe spaces all the time, and I hear meetings, I hear the community, but we can clearly see that spaces are not safe for all of our community. And nowadays, it's almost like if you're in a safe space, all of a sudden you're overrun by, you know, a bunch of people getting married who are getting engaged, and they think that we're like a fetishized kind of group of people that you can come and party with and have fun. And it's like, hang on, you're encroaching on our safe space. You need to be respectful here, and not come in and try and make this all about your kind of a space. You know, nowadays there are spaces we can't go to because we know when we get there that there could be violence, or there could be, it's such a small place that people will know each other. So confidentiality, all of those things. So I'd really like to see safer spaces that are actually safe for people that it needs to be for, rather than trying to be this something it is not, which, you know, so safe spaces is a big one for me. But also making sure people are at the forefront, and making sure that there's a cross section of those people. So not just, you know, someone like me, there's also someone young. I'm always saying that we need young people involved, and that's hard because we need to empower young people, and there's older people involved, and we need to make sure that all the things that come with having older people involved are factored in. You know, we can't just say we want all these people in, but we're only going to have one system to do that, because that system doesn't fit everyone. It doesn't fit everyone's needs. We need to make sure that everyone is included, and we do that however we do that, make it happen rather than making the excuses.
I agree with you, brother, definitely. Yep, next 5 years, watch this space. We're going to be doing things all over Australia, all through the system. That's very true. Thank you, brother. Thank you, Damien. All of you all have been amazing, and your presentations have been very powerful, very empowering for brother and sister. It's amazing. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks all the panelists. You know, it is your journey, and the stories that you've told today, you know, are amazing. You know, I wanted to hand it over to Ricki, who's going to ask the same questions to Daniel, because what we wanted to make sure that we include Daniel in the conversation as well, not just to be a moderator, but for his lived experience as well. So yeah, over to you, Ricki.
Okay, and once again, thank you, Daniel. And I know your words will come through from your heart. Can you recount a time when you personally felt that your voice was not heard, or you were overlooked for a governance role within the queer community?
Well, really, about the people in the area, in the community, some of them, I think, with their attitudes, you know, sometimes with my own, you know, community in the deaf culture, they're not aware of who I am and where I'm from. So I feel like I'm not comfortable with a lot of those people. It's, you know, sometimes embarrassing. You know, I want to connect and I want to represent, and I can't be involved. There's no opportunities. You know, I get it. There's a limit. You know, people put you down because, you know, most communities have, they've got their, you know, the civil rights of, you know, everybody, of the LGBTQI and disabilities and the systems in Australia. So, you know, there's nothing really, you know, for civil rights. I find that it creates a barrier there.
That's that experience you've just relayed really touches me, because I think we use the word voices so much in the last 5 years, but I think a lot of the times we exclude people who are deaf, and we need to realize that voices isn't just a sound that comes from our lips. It's also the sound that that the language of hands, and we must always remember that inclusiveness means all abilities in all ways we communicate. To the second question now, do you personally feel there are equitable opportunities for First Nation queer representations within queer-led spaces? And can you elaborate from your own intersectionality?
Yes, because our First Nations queer communities around Australia, it's been very quiet. It's like we've been locked up, and I don't feel like there's a lot of opportunities. I think there's a lot of barriers. I think we need to show, you know, who we are. I think, you know, we have a lot of work to do, you know, that we are different, and it's very important for us, yeah, to have opportunities and choices, and get everybody together, and, you know, bring everybody together, and brother, sister, doesn't matter who you are, what diverse backgrounds, everybody be involved. You know, we're all equal, we're all the same, we all have the same opportunities, and it's been a huge impact for me, actually.
Thank you for sharing that. The next question, do you consider the Australian peak bodies who advocate for queer rights provide the same amount of representations for our First Nations communities?
Well, there was a time that I had an experience that happened to me. I was involved in a meeting. At that time, I was representing, I did a presentation, and most people, like, they sort of used my words and my ideas and, you know, ran with it. And I thought, hang on, that was my suggestion, my ideas. And then later I found out I had a lot of good feedback and the businesses, but they sort of took my words and advice and you know, ran with that. So, and then, you know, I thought, well, we've got the funding, we'll use it, and we won't include Daniel and what he had to say, but we'll use our words and move forward with it. So, yeah. And then, yeah, sort of shared the floor, and then basically didn't give me an opportunity to, you know, say what I wanted to say. And then I thought, oh, hang on, you've used my words, you've stolen what I had to say and where my ideas were going. And I thought, oh, that's great, because it was my, you know, my presentation, my talk. And I thought it was very important that, you know, First Nations people need to, you know, be established, and we want to share our information. That's okay. But I just found that these organisations were, you know, ticking the boxes once again.
And I just want to say to everyone listening at this point, this is the heart of, you know, when we talk about stolen culture and stolen ways. Daniel's example highlights why we must support each other and how we must now move to being more inclusive within our own queer spaces. That it's not enough just to be on a board in terms of giving information, but to be duly respected and compensated for that valuable knowledges. You know, we're not just there as token representations, but as Daniel, someone with high skills and energy. You know, this just shows the example what must be changed, and it is not acceptable that in our society today, Daniel's experience is something that we perhaps would have seen over 95 years ago. Now going on to the next important question. What experiences have you had from within our own First Nations queer communities that have made you feel excluded?
No, I haven't felt that actually. Because yeah, I'm always in Sydney and I'm always making sure that I go to places and be involved, and as a gay man, I get out there and meet people. So I don't feel like I've been excluded in the communities, because I really make a point of getting out there and trying to bring people together. So yeah, I like to lift you up. I like to lift everybody up and, you know, be part of the same group and yeah, in our community, and show who we are. So I'm really, you know, energized in that area. I'm really passionate. You know, I don't feel like I've been disregarded. I feel like, you know, sometimes, you know, maybe people might not contact me and might maybe not see me. That's fine. I accept that. You know, you do what you want to do. I do my art, and that's, you know, that's my joy. That's fine. Yeah, but I like to see everybody together.
Oh, thank you, Dan. That has uplifted me. And it's not always about exclusionary in the negative. But sometimes we have to also, and in this forum, we also have to praise where good things happen. And it does showcase that even within our Black queer spaces, that, you know, we can make each other feel warm and welcome. And thank you, Daniel, because that gives us hope. And it shows more of a character within you, that your art does transcend your likability even more so to our audience listening. And that's beautiful work behind you. And everyone, please listening, please Google this wonderful, wonderful human beings artwork. And the last and final, most pinnacle question to probably someone on the panel who has a lot to offer the world. And that is, what would you like to envisage for our queer First Nations community within the next 5 years? Over to you, Daniel.
Actually, I have seen a lot of you on the panel, and you've all said with the First Nations and disabilities on the board, there isn't those representations. So I'd like to see over the next 5 years a lot more of those representations, because there isn't enough. It's not good enough. And yeah, on the boards in those peak places. Yeah, it doesn't have, they don't have all the knowledge, those people who are currently sitting on the board. They don't have, you know, the same knowledge as the First Nations people. So I think that, you know, Aboriginal people, Indigenous, you know, there's white people, but I think we all have something to share. And I think if it's, you know, it hasn't had our First Nations people on the board, it's been the same old story. Let's move forward. Let's include those people and, you know, those diverse people to make a stronger and more valuable group that have the knowledge. And next 5 years, I'm really looking forward to really, you know, making this space a better space. I think it's time. Over the next 5 years, I'm ready. I'm ready. That's my dream.
Thank you, Daniel. And I think it's a dream that we all share in our shared community and our sense of ways of knowing for the future. And what a beautiful future that will be. Now, we are running over time, but it's been so fabulously, so wonderful and rich. And we're now moving on to the Q&A section. And thank you so much. We've had an abundance of questions. So we're going to go quickly. What we'll do to this is I'll direct it to specific people within the panel to answer specific questions because of time, but also it doesn't mean it ends here, everybody. If you do, I would suggest you reach out to Russell Weston, who's provided his email contact, to ask any further questions, and he can be in touch, because we do this is one of the most important webinars that we feel are important for everybody who's listening around the world to hear our stories. And the first question by Jackie Shepherd is that they raised that in Australia, late age women are experiencing high rates of joblessness and homelessness because as they grow older, they are not recognised as people in society who have anything legitimate to offer. And they were wondering whether can we speak from our own experiences within the queer and trans middle late age people and elders, what do we think can happen to support our middle to late age LGBTIQ people, including elders? And I'd love to throw it over to Keenan for this response.
Oh, to me? Sorry, I was reading the question again.
I guess to phrase it for you, Keenan, you know, looking at, and you're a young man, but looking at going forward to say maybe when you're reaching that older age, when you hit to my age, when you're in your 50s to 60s, and, you know, and thinking about your sister girl friends and non-binary friends, what do you think needs to happen to support our community for older women representation for housing?
Well, hopefully I make it to 50. I'll start there. But also, I'd love to see more opportunities, especially for like our older trans mob, you know, like what really is out there for our trans sisters and brothers and those that identify with that binary, you know? Like the work opportunities, are the upskilling opportunities and stuff like that. I personally don't know what's out there that actually exists that's up there, I guess, supporting and stuff like that, because a lot of the attention and focus that we're seeing, both negative and positive, is for trans youth and younger mob, you know, and often that older mob is left out, you know.
Absolutely.
And so, look, I don't think I can fully answer this question because I don't have that background, but from someone that's outside and observing, but also that is non-binary, I don't see what's out there. Like in Adelaide speaking, really, I don't really know what's out there. What can we do? You know, like I look at some of my sister girls and there's, you know, like they're even struggling to get work and stuff like that, and paid work when they sit on these boards, you know?
Absolutely.
Our time shouldn't be free.
And I might just quickly add this, I don't really want to hog up the space, but this is one of my passionate areas, because what it is that in the boards that I'm involved with, sister girls are the most disadvantaged group within our Australian society. We are less invisible. We are more likely to experience homelessness than any other population cohort within Australia. We are more likely to be experiences of domestic violence in unsecured housing and more likely to remain homeless for longer periods of time because we don't have the access to the job market, we don't have access to superannuation, we don't have access to affordable and sustainable long-term housing. So that is something, unfortunately, we can't, I'd love to say more, but we've got so many important questions to raise. And we'll go on to the next question, which is another important one that's been raised, and it is, how should governments be approaching the regional communities to capture the voices we need to have on record and assist changing our data? Who would like to, from the panel, raise their hand to answer that particular quick question? And let's give a minute response to that.
Yeah, I'll go.
Okay. Damien, go for it.
I think one of the best things I've seen in terms of practice around this is, you know, some of us are probably familiar with her, probably not, but Dr. Tracy Weston has done some fantastic work around involving the entirety of a community. So when we go into community to do any consultation, we do, you know, blackfellas love a good cook-up. So whether it's that community consultation as abroad, but then you've got to take in, you know, professionals to talk to professionals so that there's that cross, you know, cross-sector, students talking to students, you know, professionals talking to other colleagues to be able to make those doctors talking to doctors, that kind of thing, where you're kind of cross-sectioning those sections of community. But then there's got to be like a give back as well from the community to go, actually, without any of those, very specific things you want to know. These are things that we want to present to you of our perspective, so that we're not going in there with our agenda. They've got their agenda that they can clearly communicate to us as well. So it's kind of got to be that cross section of things where we're not just doing one thing when we go out there to consult. We've got to think about multiple ways and compound them into that one sort of event or those days, rather than, you know, having to go out there every 6 weeks or everything, because you just the fly in, fly out. And that's not what consultation should be about with community. And we've got to be able to bring them to the table too. And that's my experience.
Wonderful, and thank you. And for the last, unfortunately, we can't get to one last question, and I'm going to give it for our wonderful head, Russell Weston, to answer this question. And Russell, I want to pose to you, and it's been asked by someone, can you explain what the term sister girl and brother boy mean, and can you define blackness?
To me?
Yes.
Okay. I mean, you know, sister girls, I mean, I've had this conversation with some members of InterPride. You know, I don't identify myself as he or him. I identify myself as a brother boy. That's my terminology. And with, you know, the blackness side of things, you know, I am a proud, you know, first and foremost, I am a proud Yorta man. My sexuality or my gender or my blackness, you know, is within me. You know, and I think that, you know, broadly and stuff too, you know, with the blackness around about First Nations, you know, the BIPOC community as well, you know, so it's very important that people identify us first and foremost as of who we are and our skin color, not our identity as a brother boy or a sister girl. And I think that kind of concept as well needs to be sort of, you know, they need to sort of, like the word I'm trying to find is they need to find us, you know, us who we are first and foremost as Indigenous or First Nations peoples, you know, and our blackness and our identified as a brother or a sister is down the track kind of thing. So yeah.
Thank you for that, Russell. And it's back over to you, Russell, as we've now, over back to you for your final concluding remarks.
Oh, thank you. You know, it's been a very humbling experience. You know, we've had our own Zooms and conversations amongst ourselves over the last few weeks. You know, and I think personally for myself, you know, it is a very humbling experience to hear the stories and to listen. And I think, you know, at the start, you know, our ancestors and our elders will be very proud that today that we stand up for who we are as First Nations peoples. And I think that in the sense of not being sort of, you know, in the sense of the bias as well, you know, and navigating that space, you know, it is very aware that that space is not given to our people. We need to we struggle to find our voices within their own community. And then when you have organizations and the LGBTQ broader community don't give us that voice, and it's, you know, it's a very disheartening to see. You know, we are in the 2020s, you know, we're not back in the 1967 with referendum trying to find our voices, you know, as well. But I also want to say, you know, on a personal thing as well, you know, I think that over the many years kind of stuff, you know, being part of the LGBTQI space, I think that we as First Nations people need to acknowledge that where we are today is because of our ancestors, our elders, and also, you know, people who've made a contribution to the First Nations movement. You fellows on this panel today have made a contribution to that movement. And, you know, and I thank you. And I think that we need to, as of coming into 2023 in World Pride, you know, next year, I think we need to work together for the better of our people, not to leave nobody behind, no matter what ideas and views, you know, we all have different views and ideas about what should be on the agenda. But I think World Pride should be about all of us as First Nations people, that our voices are very important. You know, I think we need to pull our differences aside to make sure that we elevate our voices and listen to the ancestors and the elders who have come for us, like Mum Shirl and Eddie Quirky Marbo and Kathy Freeman and, you know, Sir Doug Nichols and William Cooper, you know, Chicka Dixon and, you know, Charles Perkins, who've made a contribution to the movement. And today I think you the panelists have made that contribution as well. So thank you. And I also want to thank personally Dr. Ryan and Richard, who was one of our vice president of Pride, for giving us an opportunity to elevate our First Nations voices today. So thank you all for tuning in and listening to these deadly people and their stories. So thank you.